and I teach for VIP Kid. I also coach new candidates through the hiring process. Today, let's discuss TPR. We will be talking about what exactly TPR is, how TPR online is a little bit different from in a traditional classroom, and I'll be showing you some examples of using TPR in your classroom. So let's get started. First of all, what is TPR? TPR is total physical response. And what that means for you is basically, how do you get your students moving so that they can understand the language and use it? Okay, so it's making that body-mind connection. So TPR was developed by a man named Dr. James Asher. And Asher was actually a professor of psychology, and he was given federal funding for over 20 years to develop this method and to investigate his hypotheses about language learning. Long story short, if you have ever studied TPR like in college, like I did, then you probably have seen videos of TPR, and it looks something like this. You will see a teacher standing up in the classroom, and all of the students are around the teacher. The teacher gives the command, and the students all do a physical response. This is kind of the early stage of learning vocabulary and new sentence structures. So for example, the teacher might, the first time introducing something, might say, I touch my head. Touch your head. And the students touch their heads. So eventually, they would understand what that command means without the teacher even having to do the physical activity. And then eventually the student would be able to speak those sentences and would understand kind of passively the grammatical structures that were going on there. Long story short, it's a little bit different in the online classroom, right? So I think that TPR online is a little bit different, mainly because of 3 reasons, and I'm going to go over them real quick with you. So the main reasons that I think TPR is different online is because of space. Okay, so total physical response. If you are in a physical classroom, it would be the teacher is standing up, moving around all over the place, and the students are doing the same thing, if they're able, of course. But online, this is all we've got, right? We are basically a shoulder, heads, arms, that's about it. And likewise, the student probably has a pretty small window, and we want to be able to see the student's mouth too. So we don't even want the student trying to be too far away. So we kind of need to adapt TPR so that it fits in our screen a little more. So our TPR would look a little more, a little more up here. So for example, what is your name? Right? It's all in this space. So that's kind of one thing, is the space, right? We have limited space when we're teaching online. We have limited time, right? If you are teaching ESL in a classroom, you probably are seeing that student every single day, and it's easy to build on that knowledge, and you can kind of toss it around, and you don't really expect the student to be speaking right away. But we have pretty limited time with our students online, right? So for VIP Kid, our lessons are 25 minutes long. If we want the student to be grasping new content, we need to make sure that student is not just listening, but is also speaking with us in that time, right? Not just listening, not just doing the physical activity, but also speaking. That's so important, especially online, and it keeps them engaged even more than just doing the physical activities. So the other way that online is a little bit different for TPR is the number of students. So remember that visual that I was just painting for you of the teacher standing in the middle of the room with all of her students or his students around? Yeah, you are one-on-one with your student, at least with VIP Kid, and that is a beautiful thing. So another thing that Asher really focused on was the fact that for language development to be successful, the student needed to feel low stress. So I think online is a great platform for learning a language, especially one-on-one, because the students aren't worried about what their classmate is thinking about how silly they look, or how they maybe aren't pronouncing it quite right yet, right? There's just a lower judgment zone there. So I think it's really optimal for doing TPR. but maybe we shouldn't call it TPR because it's a little bit different.
Good grammar.